The world's energy supply today is neither safe nor sustainable. Today, fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas account for 79% of the world's energy production, and that's a big problem. Since 1900, the global carbon emissions from the burning of fossil fuels have grown astronomically. This graph shows the death rate from accidents and air pollution caused by different sources of energy. The air pollution from burning fossil fuels kills 3.6 million people in countries around the world every year. Fossil fuels also contribute to the production of an enormous amount of greenhouse gases compared to renewable sources of energy. And in order to combat climate change, it's quite critical to limit their use. Many of us might assume that the reason so much energy still comes from gas and coal power plants is because they're cheaper. But though it was once true, that assumption has actually been obliterated by a recent decline in solar and wind costs over the past decade. When it comes to the cost of energy from new power plants, solar power is now the cheapest source, costing less than gas, geothermal, coal, or nuclear power. In fact, the cost of renewable energy has plummeted in the last decade. Solar power has cheapened at a blistering pace. Just 10 years ago, it was the most expensive option for building a new energy development. Since then, the cost has dropped by 90% according to data from the Levelized Cost of Energy report. Utility-scale solar arrays are now the least costly option to build and operate. Since 1976, the price of solar modules has decreased while the capacity has increased. Despite all this, the world's electricity supply is dominated by fossil fuels. Burning these fuels for electricity and heat is the largest single source of global greenhouse gases, causing 30% of global emissions. Solar power, on the other hand, is clean and less expensive. So how did solar power get so cheap, and why aren't we using more of it? The cost of fossil fuels and nuclear power depends largely on two factors: the price of the fuel that they burn and the power plant's operating costs. Solar energy is different. The operating costs for a solar power plant are comparatively low, and the sunlight is literally free. To understand why solar power got so cheap, we have to understand why solar technology got cheap. For this, let's go back to 1956. At that time, the cost of just 1 watt of solar voltaic capacity was $1,865, adjusted for inflation and in 2019 prices. Today, one single solar panel of the type homeowners put on their roofs produces around 320 watts of power. This means that at the price of 1956, one of today's solar modules would cost $596,800. At this price, solar was obviously hopelessly uncompetitive with fossil fuels. Then why didn't the history of solar technology end there? There are two reasons why, instead of dying, solar has developed to become the world's cheapest source of electricity today. The first reason is, even at a very high price, solar technology did find a use. The very first practical use of solar power was to supply electricity for satellites. It was in this high-tech niche where someone was willing to pay for solar technology, even at that extremely high price. The second important reason is that the price of solar modules declined when more of them were produced. More production gave us the chance to learn how to improve the production process, a classic case of learning by doing. The initial demand in the high-tech sector meant that some solar technology was produced, and this initial production started a virtuous cycle of increasing demand and falling prices. The US government also invested serious sums of money into developing modern solar technology. With falling prices, the technology came down from space to our planet. The first terrestrial applications in the 1970s were in remote locations where the connection to the wider electrical grid is costly, like lighthouses. The prices of solar modules have declined by more than 99% since 1976. Currently, over 60% of the electrical energy is generated by coal and gas, and the share of solar power is just a little over 2%. Despite a massive drop in cost, solar power hasn't replaced fossil fuels at the rate one might expect. That's because the investments, policies, and very infrastructure of the energy industry as a whole are very much skewed in the favor of fossil fuels. So many fossil fuel powered plants already exist, and running them is obviously cheaper than building new infrastructure for renewable energy. The thing that's really preventing us from rapidly transitioning is what's called a lock-in effect. We have existing fossil fuel plants where we've already paid to build them, and the cost of producing one more unit of electricity is cheaper from using existing infrastructure than building new infrastructure in most cases. So, given that we've already paid the upfront cost of this fossil fuel infrastructure, the economics don't quite line up yet where we're going to facilitate a rapid phase out of fossil fuel plants prior to the end of their life cycle. In addition to being already heavily invested in fossil fuels, there's a lot of inertia in the system due to long-term contracts between utilities, energy producers, and mining companies. And since the total energy use is not increasing that much every year, there isn't much incentive to build new renewables. Market forces and monopolies aside, there are a few other, more tangible barriers to widespread renewable rollout. We have to understand that not everyone lives in Florida. Some people live in places like upstate New York, and the sunlight is not as consistent there, and for solar power to work, we need sunlight. Also, during nights, there's no sun, so the solar panels only produce energy for a limited period of time. Take a look at this graph. It's called the duck curve. This graph shows the hourly electric load on a spring day in California. It's the lowest at night when people are asleep, and it starts rising as people wake up. It peaks around noon and starts to taper off at around 6 p.m. In places with lots of solar, this curve changes. When the sun rises, the demand for non-renewable energy drops. But when the sun sets, the demand for conventional energy shoots up again. Fossil fuel-powered plants suck at ramping up production so quickly, so they have to be kept running at a certain output capacity throughout the day, even though there's no need for that energy, and that results in the production of more power than is being used. And the decades-old power grids aren't capable of handling this excess power. Solar power isn't as efficient as other sources of energy. To measure the efficiency of energy systems, we have to look at something called a capacity factor. It basically measures how often a plant is running at maximum power. A plant with a capacity factor of 100% means it's producing maximum energy it can do all of the time. This graph shows that solar power falls way behind other power sources in terms of capacity factor. Another thing holding back solar power is the overall grid infrastructure. The available power grid infrastructure was built to work with consistent power generation levels, and these grids may not be able to cope with the inconsistency of solar energy. National grids are adapting, but the infrastructure investments are huge and the work is slow. In Europe, a plan to build a massive solar farm in the Sahara Desert that would provide 15% of Europe's power by 2050 collapsed because the costs involved in the transmission of solar power have not fallen as fast as the costs to build panels. One of the better solutions to deal with the shortcomings of solar power is batteries. Excess power produced during the day could be stored in batteries, which can then be used during the hours when sunlight is not available. Tesla, among others, claims they will soon be able to provide affordable storage to private rooftop solar and large utilities alike. As technology continues to improve and more authorities invest in solar power, it will become cheaper across the globe. The price drop in solar power is in a momentary fluke. By nature, solar technology will continue to grow more affordable regardless of what the fossil fuel market does.